if Donald Trump is re-elected as president, then the kind of Cold War situation which we are experiencing between China and the United States will continue. If Joe Biden comes as the next president, I don't think they are going to have the resolve to confront China.
Let me introduce Dr. Srikanth Kondapalli, a professor in Chinese studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and Atul Aneja, an eminent journalist and a strategic affairs expert. What expectations do you have from these talks?
Well, this is a marathon which is going on, so I don't have much expectations right now given the situation we are tied up in. To me, the situation seems to have been frozen after what happened on August 29th night when the Special Frontier Forces occupied the heights along the south bank of the Pangong Tso Lake. And I don't see any material change taking place on the ground since then. Now, to precipitate any material change and for talks to make a headway, there are certain factors which have come into play, and we go to from the Ladakh theater, we have to move into the Indo-Pacific theater. There is pressure being applied by the United States on China from that side along South China Sea and Taiwan Straits. But the Chinese are not going to be persuaded as of now by that pressure. We also had the Quad meeting of the four countries, that is India, Australia, Japan, and the US, which adds incremental pressure on China, which took place on the 6th of October. But I think the critical factor which will motivate a material change on the ground would be the November elections in the United States. My own feeling is that if Donald Trump is re-elected as president, then the kind of Cold War situation which we are experiencing between China and the United States will continue further. That is what's going to add more pressure. And when you have negotiations at that phase, I think those will be the negotiations which will yield concrete results. Frankly, very surprised with the way the American force projection has been made in South China Sea, along the Philippine Sea and then South China Sea and along the Taiwan Straits. Now, there are American military magazines, I mean, these are official ones, which are talking about the need to position one core of US forces in Taiwan to change the balance of forces. There is a move in the US House of Congress to change the One China principle, the treaty which was signed, or the agreements which were signed in 1979 by Jimmy Carter. So there is a lot of development movement taking place in that part of the world, which is going to impact how China behaves in Ladakh. I think we need to take a very be vigilant about where that pans out. And I do believe that the coming of the November elections is going to be critical in deciding not only what happens in the South China Sea and East China Sea, but it will have a very strong and a fundamental bearing on the way the disengagement process or the lack of it takes place in Ladakh. Because I watched this, and like all of us did, this debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence, where Kamala Harris, that is a Democrat, she's saying that it was wrong on Trump's part to fight a trade war with China. That indicates to me the mindset of the Democratic Party. I think won't be a great thing if whatever is the mainstream opinion. But I think if Joe Biden comes as the next president and the Democratic Party establishment becomes the ruling party in the United States, I don't think they are going to have the resolve to confront China as a Trump administration in second edition do. So we got to watch that very carefully. And within the Quad, the US role is going to be, I think, very, very critical on what happens in the entire scenario, right from the west, from the South China Sea right up to Ladakh.
I think speculation apart, let us look at the bipartisan consensus. Whoever wins in November, the bipartisan consensus mentioned China as a challenge, number one, and the bipartisan consensus between Democrats and Republicans also mentioned about the relationship that they need to move forward with India. I think these two consensus exist simultaneously. If you look at the White House, the national security strategy, or the perspective planning for the next 25 years perspective, they have indicated that these two consensus are in place. When you look at the debates between Democrats and Republicans, whoever is going to win in November, we will see these two to be implemented. Maybe the degree of opposition to China would be lesser among the Democrats, but they will also raise a lot of issues on human rights, on missile proliferation, on trade deficits as well.
Right.
These are all part of the Clinton administration, Obama administration. They have raised these issues in the strategic and economic dialogue processes. So it is likely that the Democratic government is also will engage with China in a competitive manner, if not the same level as the Trump administration has followed. On the other hand, with India, we have seen Obama administration speaking in the Indian Parliament about the membership on the Security Council for India. He said we welcome the membership to the Security Council. Of course, he didn't mention when should India enter.
Somewhere in the
Uh,
distant
uh,
future, probably.
yeah, but this is still a progress made with one of the crucial P5 members,
Right.
unlike China, which has not mentioned anything explicit in relation to the Security Council membership. So there is, and then we have seen during the Bush administration, Obama administration, and during Trump administration, the Ashton Carter's remark that less than 1% of the Indian requests have been rejected in terms of the arms sales. And he mentioned that the defense relations are the basis for bilateral relations. A very strong comment from the Pentagon, which is likely to continue. So these two consensus, competition with China and building up relations with India, are likely to continue regardless of who is going to sit in the White House in the November round.
Right.
So that is number one. Number two, yes, indeed, if Biden wins the elections, there are some cosmetic changes that are quite possible. The South China Sea related, because in South China Sea they have over $1 trillion of goods and services passing through out of nearly $5 trillion. So this is, as Hillary Clinton, a Democrat, mentioned, this is in national interest of the United States. So I don't think the Biden administration will step down on the South China Sea matters.
The Americans have already very soon, probably in the 26th of this month, going to sign the BICA agreement of sharing geospatial data with India, which would mean that we will have data on exact pinpointed locations of Chinese weaponry and troops. And along with that comes this proposal or the negotiations on MQ-9 drones being transferred from the US to India, which can do a lot of damage once you have the BICA data with you. So I think the US factor needs to be considered more strongly, in my view, rather than the Quad as such.